Welcome to Oasis, St. Luke's midweek service. My name is Deanna Heiss, and I am a member here. Sweatshirts and football and crock pots and pumpkin spiced everything is among us. It is fall, and I think last spring there were many of us who never thought that we would continue to be worshiping virtually during this season, and yet here we are. And I don't mean that as in, here we are. I mean that as in, here we are. God is still here. St. Luke's is still here. And if you are watching this, you are still here. And as always, no matter who you are or where you come from, you are welcome here. Back in 1998, a band out of Minneapolis called Semisonic had a huge hit with a song called Closing Time. In my opinion, the song was only ever sort of average, but it got huge radio play and was on just about every hour of every station across the country. One memorable line in the song that is attributed to ancient philosopher Seneca goes like this: every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. I'll say that one more time. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. It's this concept that leads us to our conversation with Pastor Roger Black today for our meditation and word. Pastor Roger has been serving as St. Luke's interim bridge senior pastor for the past couple years as we have been waiting to call a new senior pastor. While St. Luke's is so hopeful and inspired and excited to have called Pastor Tim Mabey, who will be starting in October, this also means that our time with Pastor Roger has come to a close. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Since we can't gather and celebrate and thank and eat cake like we all like to do, we wanted to honor his time here, at least in very small part, with a conversation. Welcome, Pastor Roger. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So for those of the viewers who are new to St. Luke's and those who need a little reminder, please give us a couple introductory details about yourself, like who's in your family, where you live, and who currently lives in your house with you.
All right, I live in Antioch. My wife Pam is there, and we have a new puppy named Boji, for Okaboji, about 16 weeks old. We have 2 daughters and 2 sons-in-law and 6 grandchildren who don't live within our household, but who we get together with quite often, and that's why we chose to come back to the Madison area in semi-retirement and in retirement.
So what have ended up being my 3 icebreaker questions for many of our guests who give the meditation and word. What is your favorite breakfast cereal?
Favorite breakfast cereal? Well, I'm a bit eclectic, but I would have to say Frosted Mini Wheats. All
right, favorite time of day?
Favorite time of day? I have reflected on that a little bit. I think it's like 9 p.m. because that's when most of the sporting events are getting to their crucial ending.
And your favorite park or walking trail in the Madison or surrounding areas?
Well, right now I'm enjoying the upper Yahara Trail for running and biking, which is right in Windsor, going to DeForest.
So if we can talk for a little bit about sort of the nature of being an interim pastor. Coming into a congregation where you know that your time there is limited by definition, and you know a congregation is in transition, is a very unique situation to be in and to knowingly go into. So tell us a little bit about when in your own faith story you felt called to this particular type of ministry.
Well, I really look at my call to interim ministry being kind of 3-part. In 1994, I was completing a an advanced degree, a PhD in theology at Marquette, and I had to leave my regular parish in order to be more creative in writing each day. And so I did, and then I needed some income, and I started interim ministry, 4 different interim ministries for the next 6 years. And I found that the gifts that I had in terms of getting to know people and congregations and kind of having a calming effect on congregations going through transition were good for me and well received by others, because we're always thinking of the call as having to do with the response of people to us as ministers. So then I went back into regular parish in 2000, 2006. I remembered that experience, wanted to come back to ministry in Wisconsin, and connected with the Greater Milwaukee Synod. And they said the best entryway was this interim in Burlington, Wisconsin, 21 miles away. And that was a great experience. By the way, it was a little bit longer than this whole interim even, almost 2.5 years. And I definitely felt the ability to work within a conflict resolution mode, because that's what that interim was more suited for. And so during that last year in 2008, I became curious about the training, and then did the training with the National Association of Lutheran Interim Pastors, and committed myself to interim ministry, and I've done like 11 or 12 congregations more since that time. So I think, like a lot of things, it's a gradual recognition of your suitability for something and matching your gifts to what ministry is possible. Some bishops and assistants to bishops consider the calming presence to be the only gift or ability that's needed. I don't believe that. I mean, the education of the grief cycle and transition is a basis of life. I mean, learning how to make transitions, to me, is basic. So when I felt the calling to interim ministry, it's kind of like, well, you want to be an educator. I finished my PhD, but there wasn't an avenue there for teaching. And this is another way of teaching, one of the life lessons that I myself struggle with. So, we're called to places where we struggle ourselves, like making transitions. I don't enjoy it. It's not enjoyable. It takes a lot of energy. And you said, that the interim pastor has to do it over and over again, but people have to do this over and over again. And do we enter it willingly? Not necessarily. So I mean, in my own family, it wasn't done well, and so I see that kind of importance of it, But isn't that true, though, that you do the things? I mean, I always write sermons to myself. The generosity and generosity sermons, you struggle with generosity, or letting people go. Let go, let God. That's my life lesson. So, I mean, we do tend to address the things, and we know ourselves the best, right? So, I heard Pastor Jerry talk about extroversion and his dad being an extrovert, and I think of that too. But my dad would talk to anybody, but he especially talked to strangers, and he was embarrassing. That's also a gift for interim ministry, because if the majority of ministers are introverted, which they are according to studies, interim pastors should be more toward one of the specialties for extroverts, I think. I always feel like it's a special calling to be a pastor in terms of the access to people's stories, and the like hospital visits and pastoral care visits. I mean, having that access, and we're seeing it now when it's given and taken away, like at the university hospital system by the month based on the figures. It's just wonderful when you ask somebody, well, how can I help you, and what brings you here, and they tell you that, and they tell you their whole story going back. When does that happen? But it happens in ministry, and it happens within confidentiality if it's a serious thing. But that openness too is something that's special to ministry, I think.
One of the early hurdles of any job is learning the people and the culture and the style and the dynamic of an organization. And they're all very different. So what is it like to sort of repeat that process kind of voluntarily over and over again in interim ministry?
Well, one might think it would be difficult, and why do it? And I get asked that quite a bit. Why aren't you a regular minister? And I, of course, say, I am a regular minister of Word and Sacrament, but with a specialty. But I enjoy it. And I guess it's because I enjoy meeting people and getting to know their names, which is another suitability if anyone's considering going into interim ministry, to be able to remember names and work on that, and especially connect those names to personal stories. So it really is a love of people that drives you to overcome that feeling of, well, I'm going to do this again and again and again. As far as the nature of it, or the climate of congregations, for me, that's part of being a lifelong learner, that you're always comparing and contrasting to situations you had before. And interim ministry offers you a great laboratory to do that. It's laboratory in the sense of it offers you a great opportunity to do that, and to look back and use the knowledge you gained in previous congregations and compare and contrast them. I got a little bored sometimes when I was in especially smaller congregations that had a fixed amount of people and a fixed amount of stories, and also had the regular annual things coming up as your main focus of ministry.
Is there, as you're preparing to join a new congregation, is there a song or a hymn or a verse that you take comfort in, or that inspires you as you are sort of embarking on something new? Are there words that you rely on to sort of enter into the newness of a situation?
We all have ways of kind of pumping ourselves up and getting in the right place before we enter a new situation. I guess in terms of Scripture, I always think of Philippians 4:13, and I'll be sharing part of that in my last sermon here. And that is, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Because like a lot of situations that might be considered like cold calls, cold situations you're in, it's a way of feeling, well, I've done this before, God has been with me, God is calling me to this, and therefore I have God's strength. As far as the work of interim ministry, particularly in any conflict situations, it's the prayer attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. Some question whether it is, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace, and everything else that follows, that it's not always intentionally from our perspective how things go, but God is behind it. So God can sow seeds of understanding, and God can use me.
Tell us a little bit about after your completed call here. What's next for you?
Well, in your introduction, you referred to the need to do virtual worship and things this way. So after this one, and this is my third bridge interim after formal retirement 2.5 years ago, I am not going to rush into the next ministry experience. I have let the Synod know that I need time until November. In a way, that kind of space is important because St. Luke's is going to be hard to compare to. And with that in mind, I need a break, to get started in a different place. And then I have a feeling that in terms of ministry, I would like to not go to a place that does want to worship inside during these next 3 or 4 months. So that would kind of frame that. As far as what I would be doing otherwise, I have a couple writing projects that I just kind of dropped 3-4 years ago. One is of all the congregations I've served, particularly interim congregations, and it's a book of these experiences, and especially any conflict situations, and then kind of you respond to them from probably a ministry point of view. I also have a blog on faith and ethics, which I will return to and have only done about twice in the last 2 years. Garrison Keillor, I wrote that piece a couple weeks ago on what's happening, sort of like the news at Lake Wobegon, Lake Mendota, and I listened to it for years. My kids were just bored of his voice, but he has one piece where it is the pastor and his wife that are letting their daughter go to college, or taking their daughter to college, taking their daughter to college, and the whole piece was about this has been your whole job from the moment that you became a parent, and getting them to this point of being able to go forward with independence, and yet it's the hardest thing in the world to do. And, as he often did in some of those, he really caught the emotional side of that. And that was hard for me to do. When my first daughter went to Luther, we dropped her off, and I was crying, and it's like, oh, you didn't know where that came from. So I think he really hit it. I mean, he really hit the nail on the head. And so it is for churches and especially interim ministry. That's been your whole job, but yet it's not 100% easy, and it is an emotional experience.
Well, I know I speak for myself and for many others when I say from our heart to your heart, thank you for your time and your patience and your faith and your leadership during this time for us. And Godspeed. We wish you all the best. Thank you, Pastor Roger.
Thank you, Deanna. It's been all my pleasure.
There's so much we have lost as we look down the road where all the prodigals have walked, and one by one the enemy has whispered lies and led them off as slaves. But we know that you are God, yours is the victory. We know there is more to come that we may not yet see. So with the faith you've given us, we step into the valley of faith. We call out to dry bones, come alive, come alive. We call out to dead hearts, come alive, come alive. Up out of the ashes, let us see in our mirror eyes. We call out to dry bones, come alive. God of endless mercy, God of unrelenting love, rescue every daughter, bring us back the wayward sons, and by your spirit breathe upon them, show the world that you alone can save. You alone can save. When we call out the dry bones, come alive, come alive. We call out the dead hearts, come alive, come alive. Up out of the ashes, let us see in our mirror eyes. We call out the dry bones, come alive. So breathe the breath of God, now breathe the breath of God, now breathe the breath of God, now breathe. Oh, breathe the breath of God, now breathe the breath of God, now breathe the breath of God, now breathe. Oh, breathe the breath of God, now breathe the breath of God, now breathe the breath of God, now breathe. Oh, breathe the breath of God, now breathe the breath of God, now breathe the breath of God, now breathe. We call out to dry bones, come alive, come alive. We call out to dead hearts, come alive, come alive.